Here's a quick assembly guide for the ThunderStrike V2 Pull-Twist Fuze. So to get started, we'll go over the hardware that you'll need. The main components like the bolt and the spring are the same as the standard fuse, as well as most of the materials and tools that you'll need. Getting started on the actual assembly, we'll just process all of the printed parts and remove all of the supports. And the supports for the threads are the same as the other fuses. You only want support on the flat overhang and not in the actual threads. And with the top cap, it is best to have supports inside and you can simply pry them out. You also want to do a little bit of cleanup so that all the parts function smoothly. Take an M4 by 50mm bolt. These are the same bolts that we use across all of the fuses, and get the thread started in the top of the rotating catch. Then just screw it all the way through. And right before the end of the threads, we like to add a little bit of adhesive on the bolt just to keep the rotating catch from spinning on the bolt. We use Gorilla Glue, but any other type of glue should suffice. And the reason we advise against thread locker or Loctite is because it can actually be corrosive to plastic. So just add a small amount to the bolt or directly on the rotating catch. And then screw it until it's fully tight. Then just go ahead and drop it into the fuse body and grab a spring. The springs that we use are just these generic ones off of Amazon. The dimensions are 1.2 by 10 by 30 millimeters and they're very cheap online. You could use 1.3 millimeter springs for more power, but these seem to work just fine. So go ahead and grab a spring and slot it into the bottom of the fuse and make sure that it clicks in the ratchet. You can simply do this by turning it left and hearing for the clicks. Once you have the spring slotted into the bottom, go ahead and grab the detonator base and start the threads on it. Just make sure it stays as central as possible because you don't want it to be angled one way or another. Once the threads are about halfway through, we like to take it off to add a little bit of adhesive onto the bolt. We just use a small amount of regular super glue, and the reason for this is so that the detonator isn't spinning or rotating when you're trying to cock the mechanism. So now just simply screw it on all the way until the bolt becomes flush with the detonator. Once you've got the detonator screwed on, just make sure that the ratchet works by spinning the spring clockwise from this direction and making sure that it locks up counterclockwise. From there, you might need to cock the mechanism a few times just to wear out the ledges. Now we'll go ahead and put on the twist wheel, so simply place it on top of the fuse mechanism. And if it's too tight like this one is, you can simply deburr the edges or sand the inside of it to make it smoother. So just take a precision knife or a deburring tool and just deburr the inside corners. But also make sure not to take off too much material. We'll put it back onto the fuse and make sure that it operates fairly smoothly. Also keep in mind that it should be slightly tighter than where you want it to be because it will wear out over time. And before we put on the top cap, we can test the mechanism and the safety. So just pull the ring up, twist it over to fire and cock the mechanism. And then switch it over to safe. The two little bars on the twist wheel should hold the rotating catch from moving. I'll give it a test just to make sure that everything is in fact working. And the safety on this one seems to be functioning pretty well. Also, when you're fitting on the twist wheel, you do want to make sure that there's at least a little bit of resistance so that it doesn't switch over to fire accidentally. And finally, we need to put on the top cap by screwing the two bolts into the holes. The bolts that you need for the cap are just standard M2 by 10mm bolts. The ones that we use are these silver hex ones, but you could use any kind you want. So just take two of these bolts and start screwing them into the cap. You can stop screwing when they just start to stick out of the bottom. It should look something like this. Then all you need to do is align those bolts to the holes in the fuse body. Then just screw it all the way through. So if you have the same hex bolts as us, they should lay flush with the top cap. As you can see, this one runs very smoothly. And that's it for the Pull-Twist Fuze assembly.